Click the links to join the channel here over at SubScribestar, where there is an articles and unfiltered videos over there, because YouTube is all about censorship. So Sinners, strongman power fantasy against an enemy that never existed. Here's the thing with the movie. When you pay attention to the details and you start taking notes, it's a bizarre self-own, which you can do if you go sail the high seas for the movie and watch it at home. The story starts with these two criminal characters who have been stealing from Italians and Irish, among others. That's how they got their starting capital to get this roadhouse that they're going to start going. Spoilers, of course. It's a real inconsistent movie because the core of it is this dishonest foundation of racial grievances that in the movie are so heavy-handed that they're just endless strawmans. So he has to build scenarios in the movies that don't have verisimilitude because the people in real life wouldn't act like this. Or in current year with security cameras and cell phone videos, you can see that people are starting to understand that previous historical narratives have been a lie. So the movie is set years ago, I think post-war, and it shows saints and sinners, but then you go on social media and you can see for yourself who the sinners are, and it's clearly not us. We're awesome. So there's this core of a confused movie wrapped around all these other inconsistent threads, but the fixation on anti-whiteness is such a nonsense to anyone who knows a little history, which the audience for this movie definitely doesn't. I guess they think it, on social media they're talking about how it's the historically accurate setting, and you look at them and you go, you've never opened a book. You don't know what you're talking about it. You think this is, when they say historically accurate, they're talking about what Hollywood movies have I saw Mississippi burning, and so I know the history of the area. Try reading some books, and the history is going to be a lot more complicated and nuanced. So this is a race-based power fantasy for a really dumb audience, and it's going to do well because, unfortunately, a lot of America is dumb and brainwashed. The movie's got a religious theme, but it's too inconsistent to be effective, and it's framed as the black guy is an evil sinner because the evil is in the physical object of the guitar itself. It's the object that is causing him to sin. But the question is, well, within what framework? And it's kind of loosely in a Christian framework. The guy's preacher boy's name, son of a preacher, because that's the only one that would make sense. But then you get the feeling that the director probably hates Christianity. The thing is, the vampires here are taken from the European setting, from pre-Christian Europe and from the Christian European tradition. I don't think vampires played a role in African folklore, and the tools they used to fight them were not in African folklore. The movie mentions the things that they used to fight vampires: garlic, silver, holy water, sunlight, wooden stakes. And the sunlight has always been used to represent kind of God in various forms. But it skipped the cross and crucifix. And there's a scene where she throws pickled garlic that was, sitting on a bar, like, I don't know what they call it, like fermented garlic, whatever. And she throws that at a vampire, and it kind of has the effect of in other movies when they throw holy water. The movie is a mess if you're paying attention, but the audience is definitely not. It's kind of a flashy period piece vibe of a black power fantasy, but it contradicts itself, and it makes the audience feel good, so that's kind of good enough for the audience. The movie starts with this heavy-handed scene that doesn't make sense at all because it would never happen. You've got the two lead characters who are well-dressed. They're the two hip, slick, and cool big city guys who later you find out that they're thieves. They're criminals and thieves. That's how they got their money. They're meeting with a guy to buy a building to use as a roadhouse post-war, except the seller is the local club leader of the Kathleen Kennedy type of club. And he goes alone in his infinite wisdom to meet two black criminals to do a real estate deal. That's stupid and doesn't make sense. He would be, he wouldn't sell to them in the first place or even have a preliminary discussion with them. And two, there's no way in hell he's going to meet up with them or meet up with them at least without somebody riding shotgun to have a little bit of backup. In current year, you wouldn't go meet up with people in this situation because you've seen too many Twitter videos of what happens. So why on earth would a club leader, the local club leader, meets with them to go do a real estate deal? That doesn't make any sense. If they had to do it, why they would probably use an intermediary, a real estate attorney or just some local attorney to make the deal for both parties. Ask yourself, would you go alone to meet two guys out in the middle of nowhere to do a real estate closing? You would meet at somebody's office. They're absolutely not going to go travel out there to meet these two strangers. But they had to force that scene in the movie, so the fat real estate guy, the club leader, calls them boy like repeatedly. So then the two black thieves can put this little fat slug man in his place and threaten to delete him several times. The white guy is just going to tell them to screw off and walk away from the deal. This is, I think, in the 1940s. None of this is going to go down this way. Blacks and whites avoided each other as much as possible. That's why I mean the story is so inconsistent. These groups hate each other, but then they force them together in these scenes where both groups would just walk away from each other. So the story has the fat white guy apologizing and groveling before the two black criminals, who then say that they'll murder any white people who come by, except that they never explain why would white people care if blacks had a bar for blacks in the black part of town. The two groups don't want anything to do with each other, and then why would the club leader continue to go through this real estate deal after he was threatened to murder by these people? He's armed. He just start walking out of the room. None of this makes sense. But the narrative here is that the Klan leader goes to meet two dangerous black criminals to insult them, and then immediately back down and grovel, and then accept their threats and continue to sell them the real estate. But he actually sells them the building and comes back later, and he's planning on deleting them all and burn the building down, because white people in this black universe are comically evil and stupid, because these writers and producers grew up being brainwashed by anti-white globalist TV. Or since there are no or not enough Jesse Smollett situations, they have to create fictional ones. And I will say, like, people are finally kind of catching on to this. But the audience for these movies are so stupid and brainwashed that when they hear the trigger word of Klan, they bypass cognition and they just go to having an emotional response that the Klan are comically evil and go around deleting anything that moves. Which doesn't make sense, because if they really wanted to wipe out black folk, well, there wouldn't be any blacks. The country at the time was 90% white. What do they think would happen if post-Civil War these groups got together and decided, you know what, we're just gonna go out and wipe these people out? It's like, well, they would accomplish that if they really wanted to do it. And then, as I mentioned, half the victims of the Kathleen Kennedy Club were white. People who were accused of various crimes, and obviously there's a reason for due process. But you're living out in the boonies and there's no sheriff around. Like, you're going to have to form your own law. It's like they do the best they can with what they have. And I mean, clearly the solution is like, oh, well, these two groups should just separate from each other. They should live separately. And it's weird how no one else reaches that conclusion. So their own story canon is illogical because it's built on lies that a really dumb audience will accept, and this stupid writer created. So that's one of the themes in the movie, that the Klan is somehow some serious issue in their day-to-day lives, and they always have to watch out for this group of night riders. And the audience is supposed to just accept that bit of nonsense, that they're in this vacuum. They never ask, well, why did it exist in the first place? What kind of people were they going after? And why? What were they accused of? That's why the movie doesn't make sense. And then, why was the Klan deleting so many white Catholics and so many white people? Oh, because they were accused of horrendous crimes. Okay, so then the racial angle of this extrajudicial proceeding doesn't seem to quite make sense. There's another angle to it. It's kind of the roughness of the country needed some things needed to be fixed, but it's like the racial angle wasn't really an angle, but history, because people are brainwashed by globalist government schools and media propaganda, has convinced people, because they see things. They grew up their whole life watching TV and watching movies, and they think that the movie screen is telling them the truth, because I mean, people are remarkably susceptible to brainwashing. The only escape to that is if you were a reader when you grew up, and then you start to see propaganda and you wonder, like, well, why doesn't everyone else see this? Because a lot of times they're just not readers. They're not opening books. So that's why the movie doesn't make sense, because it's so inconsistent. The Black Thief has a truck full of stolen booze from the Italians and the Irish, and two other black thieves are openly looting from the original thieves. So the guy goes out there and shoots them, and it's played off as the shooter is cool because he set those ninja boys straight and wouldn't accept any disrespect, so he shoots one in the butt and one in the leg or something, and then he pays to have them the wounds patched up. Except later in the movie, he admits that he stole the alcohol and he probably stole the truck. None of the movie makes sense, but it makes the audience feel cool, like they're the cool character. And the two black thieving lead characters are eloquent and well-spoken, and they're wearing nice suits. And the white stereotypes are just that. They're just pure stereotypes, starving grapes of wrath, colorless cliches. Even the token Chinese are hip, slick, and cool because, of course, blacks and Asians get along so well. And it's really the fair-skinned people of the light that are always causing problems. That's why the suspension of disbelief for this movie is only going to work for a pretty dumb audience who's historically illiterate, because it's so far removed from reality. Everyone white is stupid and crude, and the blacks are smart, eloquent, and refined, and all the non-white groups in America all get along just fine. None of that makes any sense. Then you enter the vampires from stage left, who are, of course, the fair-skinned Irish Dracula for some reason. Maybe the Irish vampire is getting revenge for the black guy robbing the Irish and the Italians. It would make more sense if you had an Eastern European or even a black vampire to fit in with the theme. That way you wouldn't have the racial angle. But obviously they want the racial angle, even if it doesn't work in the story. But then you have the three white vampire musicians who try to get into a black honky-tonk, which doesn't make sense. They would just go to a white bar or wait in the woods for people going to and leaving the bar because they're vampires to prey on them. Three white people are not going to go into a black bar in the 40s or 50s, wherever this movie is set. They're not any more likely to go into that bar than blacks would go into a white bar. It just wouldn't make sense at the time. I mean, it doesn't make sense now. And there's some sub-theme of the vampires talking about universal love and harmony, which kind of felt like horseshoe theory, where the globalist do-gooders are preaching love and acceptance, but they're actually demonic, shape-shifting vampires who need the stake. So when you actually break the movie down, it's stupid, but it feels good to a dumb audience. White country folk are stupid and evil, and they're the predators on peaceful blacks who just want to live and be left alone, except when they're robbing each other of stolen alcohol, which is in the first 10 minutes of the movie. Then, of course, they have to shoot each other, but I'm the issue for pointing out that the heroes in the movie are actually violent criminals, and the first white victims of the primary vampire, the Irish guy, are the victims who didn't do anything wrong in the movie. And then they also had the wise, well-composed Indians who were fighting vampires on the horses that I think, if I remember right, the Europeans brought to the New World. The movie is so heavy-handed and stupid that it only works for a stupid audience. We get it. The white characters are bad, and all the non-whites portrayed in the movie are these soulful saints. It's like a child's idea of a cool movie where the self-insert gets to roll around in women, essentially, drink, gamble, smoke, have everyone be subservient to him, and then at the end of the movie, take a Tommy gun and, like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Commando, he walks into a group of a dozen white guys who are all armed, and just blasts them to pieces and gets like one shot on them. It's just the dumbest thing ever. So that's the framework for the movie, that the blacks, Chinese, and Indians are super smart and capable, and the background setting is the stupid, evil white people, which doesn't make any sense because the European people were such godlike creatures that they built Europe, Canada, America, Australia, New Zealand. And then you compare it to the level of technology and civilization at the time that these other groups were capable of, and the anti-white narrative starts to fall apart. The movie, I mean, because you look at these, the Chinese at least, and you go like, so why'd you leave your homelands to come to this new country? Oh, because these white godlike creatures made it possible. Oh. So the movie itself is simultaneously telling you that the Europeans are these ubermensch who were able to create this system, but that they're also stupid and evil, and the non-whites are actually the smart and cool characters. None of this is logically consistent. There's like 4 stories in this, sub-stories in the main story, where if they stuck with one narrative, you'd have a very good movie, instead of a movie that's not going to stand the test of time. Take one theme, run it through its conclusion, and it works. Oh yeah, and Professional reviewers gave this really high marks because they're afraid to break it down like I broke it down. They just like, that's why Black Panther gets, a 99% or something ridiculous. If you left the white people out of the story entirely, it would be a better story. The sub-theme of the Klan didn't make any sense. We get it. You're anti-white and you want to blame them for your own behavior, which they admit in the movie that they are violent thieves, but it's really the white people saying mean words that are the problem. The evil white state of mind is much, much worse than the evil black literal actions, shooting people and thieving from each other on screen. They would have a much tighter movie without white people or Chinese in it, or even Indians hunting vampires. They just threw so much in the movie to kind of like hit all these points of how evil and stupid the European Americans are. The Indians wouldn't care about an Irish vampire. They wouldn't even bother to chase him because he looks different. He's not going to fit in to be able to prey on Indians. He's going to prey on European people, and so they don't care because, I mean, why would they? So they start the movie with this Christian church and kind of a crossroads themes about deals with the devil and sin. But the movie is such a mess that they jump over to vampires, and then they drop that storyline and never explain why the guitar that's in the beginning of the movie, or that his music was evil, or did he really make a deal with the devil at the crossroads at midnight? It's like a child threw all these elements in from earlier movies that he had grown up seeing, but not from original stories, which are in books, are like kryptonite. But then you have a really good set designer, cinematography, actors, like all the hardware of this movie was excellent. And the actors kind of pull it all together, where everything visually looked good. Like Raiders of the Lost Ark, you were so caught up in the amazing sets that you didn't realize how stupid the storyline actually was. Where Spielberg made the Germans like inhuman, comically evil. There's a scene where he's got a coat hanger. It like locks together or something. It's just so stupid. I mean, Hollywood never does this to any other group other than Europeans. And Germans are. So I was thinking as I was walking, like, Germans are sort of the B team under the English in the racial hierarchy. And I know a lot of our guys would probably get mad at me for saying that, but you start to think of accomplishments. Anyway. And I'm sure I'm deep enough in the movie that the only people listening are probably our guys. So the older you get, or the more clown-pilled you get, you realize how stupid movies are, and they've been this way for a long time. It's to the point where it's like They Live. You just can't take the sunglasses off. They're permanently. So it's to the point where it's like 99% of movies, and you realize it's pointless to care about Hollywood when the whole system is corrupt. It was almost always made to be propaganda, or it started to become propaganda very early on, as soon as they started making talkies. So the guitarist is called Preacher Boy, and the music is somehow wicked, and that's the extent of Christianity, or at least Christian involvement, probably because they think a Middle Eastern religion is the white man's religion, which doesn't make sense. It's like from the Middle East. The movie has these sub-themes where they don't go anywhere. The evil has a theme about men. There's one theme where there's like an adult theme of prurient interest, where men are performing on women to bring the women to their full conclusion, if you know what I'm saying. And it feels just kind of unnecessary. I don't like, you put it in three references to that act, which is like fine in another movie if the movie is about adult relationships. You just felt kind of like this guy has a fixation with oral pleasure. And then there's another bizarre little bit where they're telling a story about the Klan is hanging some guy and then cutting body parts off after he's gone, but they never went into, well, why was the guy being hunted by the club in the first place? Perhaps he had done some horrible act, and thus the symbolism of deleting him and then cutting those parts off would make more sense. Would he have perhaps hurt women and children, and that was the punishment to kind of serve as a warning to other people to stay away from women and children? The movie treats their race as angels And the Klan is some mythical demonic cult that was putting people in trees for shits and giggles. Then you crack a history book and you read that, well, there are reasons for everything. There's two sides, or usually three sides to every story, because one is going to be the correct angle. They were going after criminals, but that requires nuance in telling both sides of the story. And this is a power fantasy movie, so you're not going to get two sides of a story. In this, white people are just stupid and evil because they have to be for the movie's worldview to work. But what if you turned it around? Would it have more or less verisimilitude? So you have the theme of the preacher boy with his guitar, and it's tied in with sin, and he goes off and has sex with a married woman for some reason, and he's working for a violent thief, which they show on camera in the first 20 minutes of the movie. So the character's motivation doesn't work as saints and sinners and good versus evil, because you realize that the black main characters are evil. They're the bad guys, but you have to be paying attention. Most of the white characters didn't actually do anything, other than the one guy in the beginning of the movie calling them boys. So those words caused the black thieves to threaten him, and then he continued on with the real estate deal. None of that makes sense. So the blacks are the good guys, but they're also violent, thieving criminals who drink, smoke, have sex with anything that moves, including with married women. And yet it's within some Christian framework of the church and sin. You could actually examine the movie from the point of view of the vampire is sent to punish them for their sins, similar to the concept of you have to invite the vampire into your house, you have to invite the vampire into your world with your sinning ways. But the movie was such a mess that they never go down that path because they focus more on how much they hate white people. And I'm sure the guy who made the movie thought that he had done something very deep and profound here, because it's going to make a profit. But when you break it down, it's a lowbrow movie for kind of a slow audience. And then there's the quarter black woman who is there to warn against the evils of race mixing, which I guess is very cool and based. And she's the first of the black group who gets turned into a vampire, kind of symbolic there. And a few minutes before that, another actual black woman was defending her from the evil Irish vampire and calling her family in some bit of intra-racial virtue signaling, and which, if you know anything about the issue, you know that this is not how things work. There's a black pecking order, and to be fair, there's also a white one within the European group, but it doesn't get mentioned as often, and not for the reasons you'd think. They don't want white people to think of themselves as a group, as an identity, so they ignore a lot of very easy issues that they could knock out of the park. They're terrified that European people will start to have in-group preferences, so they just ignore these storylines. Anyway, they could have made a much better movie if they had tightened things up, dropped the racial angle, and just focused on the concept of sin within either the Christian framework or within their African pantheon, which they make some reference to, or even combine both if you want. But it has to show the journey from darkness and evil to ascendance into lightness and redemption. Otherwise, you don't have a hero's journey. You don't have a storyline. It's just people doing things, action, adventure, explosions in the background, or staking out vampires. But the characters have to address evil within themselves and then start on the path into serving God or the light or the right or whatever. And then moving on to the spiritual right-hand path of goodness. But the movie doesn't stick with the theme. It just has all these illogical threads, and they mainly seem to focus on the anti-white black power fantasy of revenge against like a straw man, because the director cannot stop grinding his axe and just tell the simple story well, where it's tell a simple story of good versus evil and stick with that. Instead, it's more of an adventure story where everyone involved is somewhat evil, in which case, why would we care that the vampire is doing a portrait of Dorian Gray and making their outsides match their insides when he turns them into the living dead, the vampires? The movie has all these potential themes to explore, but he can't get beyond virtue signaling about how much he hates the Klan, except that they went after criminals to keep the community safe. And the evidence is that, the Klan's long gone now, and these communities are hell on earth. They're just nightmares of crime and violence. So, like, when you actually look at this stuff, it takes you in a 180-degree conclusion to the things you've been brainwashed into believing. And to break out of that matrix of pre-programmed thought is very difficult for people. They're in this bar and they've got live music, and everyone's having a good time, except when the evil white trilogy shows up to tempt them into evil, the idea being that they were living in peace and harmony, and it's the fault of the external vampire that is bringing trouble, which is, I don't know, the symbolism of the trilogy in Christianity. Like a lot of stuff in the movie, he's just throwing symbols at the wall, and he doesn't go down the path to fully reach their conclusion, where he would have been better with a much simpler movie. The thing is, I mean, you can look at their nightclubs today and situations today, and it's not evil Irish people who are causing trouble. So even the symbolism in the movie doesn't make sense of the fair-skinned, smooth-talking outsider who just wants to play a movie and play music, and he's a shape-shifting vampire. So no, the movie is not historically accurate, but to explain why it's not historically accurate, maybe I'll do a version of this for SubScribeStar, because it's not politically correct. There's only one narrative about certain things that are allowed, and to go outside that narrative is just not for mainstream media. But the other thing is that this is community policing in action. The Kathleen Kennedy Club, yeah, that's your community policing itself. Like, it's essentially a militia, right? Like a sheriff's posse, where there's not enough police to protect the community. And you go, I was thinking, like, do a video in defense of that group, the Kathleen Kennedy Club. I probably would get some death threats, but to do it kind of tongue in cheek, like they were protecting the marginalized and oppressed, women, children, and elderly, the most vulnerable people in the community. You just throw in all those Marxist buzzwords. I could totally make it work, but honestly, I don't know if it'd be worth the death threats for a video titled "In Defense of the Klan." Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.